we're just recording there. Right? Anyway, cool. So, cheers. Thanks everybody for coming to this. Anyway, it's our Mentality Monday here in TU Dublin SU. So myself, Leslie, Luke, and Patrick here are part of the welfare team in TU Dublin Students Union. So this year, for our mental health week, we have decided that we're going to start off with men's mental health and talking a bit about our experience as men as well as like our mental health. So we've got a few lads here who are going to talk about their experiences, and we've also got some supports here from Counselling and Disability Office who are actually going to give us some proper support here as well as their experiences as well. So I might just go around the room and we'll start off the way I kind of see it is. So beside me is Scott, and then if you want to pass it on, Scott, to somebody, and then I'll do the whole way around.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. My name is Scott. Nice to meet everyone here. I'm one of the student counsellors working in TU Dublin Student Counselling Service. So it's my pleasure to be here. So I don't know who's next to me. Jerry or Gary?
Okay, thank you, Scott. My name is Gary Turner, and I am the disability officer for TU Dublin Tala campus. I have been working on the campus this past 14 years, so it's nice to see everyone. I look forward to this evening. So I pass it on to John.
Yeah. That me, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm John, and I'm an actor and filmmaker and traveller, which I think is probably relevant for this subject. And who's next?
You pass it on. Yeah, you can pass it on to Boyd there.
Go.
Okay. So my name is Boyd Saya. I'm originally from Liberia, Monrovia, and I've been in Ireland for about 16 years now, and I play intercounty football for Westmeath for the last 5 or 6 years. We'll pass it on.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, no, Patrick is just there in case of any technical difficulties anyway. So, yep. So we've started off with a quick introduction with everybody here, which is great. And our whole idea, speaking about mental health, is to talk about men's mental health, and especially from minorities, since we're all kind of us here. Besides, anyway, the lads who are working in college, myself, John, Boyd, would all be from like classes in minority area. So we're just going to talk about a bit about ourselves anyway. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Fionn. I'm the Vice President for Welfare. I am trans. I'm also gay. So my mental health background is slightly different to everybody here. So I literally lived as my life as a girl for like 18 years of my life. So, and my mental health completely changed. And when I started taking hormones and living my life as a man. So my experience would be with mental health was it was always great. And then besides obviously taking hormones and stuff, as well as the societal view and stigma of being men, it actually got my mental health got a little bit worse, just because of stigma and stuff as well. So one thing that I said to myself is if we're doing anything in this job, I would like to get a mental health panel on men and men's mental health. So that's where my experience is with mental health. So I might just ask Boydu how your experiences with mental health is, especially through the GAA scene as well. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, my mental health is, I suppose it's a lot different, but it's more towards the fact that I'm probably one of the only Black Irish GAA players at such a high level, at the intercounty level. And when I was growing up, I was probably in my local club or local area, I was the only Black kid there. And, everyone kind of looked at you differently and judge you differently. And, it has a big impact when you're growing up. You kind of feel different, or you're looked at. So people kind of think you're different than everyone else, even though you're the exact same. So I suppose my mental health is more, me trying to overcome that I'm the same as everyone else. And, that just because I'm a different skin color doesn't mean, I'm different. And I knew that, the GAA thing kind of became a big part of my life. And it was something that made me feel kind of part of the community and part of the Irish culture. And, it really helped me to become the person that I am today, and I suppose, it's more like of a positive part for me, playing GAA and, being in that community area, part of that as well. So I suppose, I'll count that as a positive part of my mental health.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds good. And John, was that similar with yourself with acting then as well, or?
Yeah, well, first of all, Fionn, let me just say it is fair play for setting this up. And I think some things like this is very important because we've seen in the last few decades that there has been a lot of societal focus on women, and rightly so, of course, in the past, and we have to evolve as a people, and human rights is key to this. But I think there's definitely a neglect in society within men and a lot of stigma around many subjects with men. And I mean, if you look at men are more likely to go to prison, men are more likely to kill themselves, men are more likely to be homeless. The list goes on and on and on. Men die in more work-related accidents, and these are kind of things that are ignored. So I think it's important to have a forum to talk about this. I suppose with myself, my journey with sort of my struggle with mental health started when I was 8 years of age, when my father committed suicide. It probably started before that, when I started to see his demise. I caught him one day trying to commit suicide, and that was about when I was about 7, and that kind of planted a seed, I think. And the reality is that I ignored it all throughout my teens, and manifested a lot of that, and I became a boxer, and a really successful one. And I kind of gravitated towards machoism, almost like a vehicle to use this bad energy. But it culminated in like a real mental breakdown when I was like 19, going 20, about 20, and I didn't know what to do with my life. And I was suicidal is the easiest word. I was literally literally admitted to myself, now I have to kill myself. That's what I have to do. It's the only way out. And my brother Joe suggested acting. I'm gonna got into acting. Um, it was like, the only way I can describe it was like just walking through a portal into a different world, and it was creativity, and that saved me. But within the acting industry, I suppose I haven't fitted in still. That's 10 years. I started maybe, started acting, but I'm not really concerned with that anymore. I think you kind of have to start focusing on yourself, and looking after yourself and loving yourself. I think that's key. I think in Ireland we have a collective kind of um, guilt and a collective kind of shame, and a lot of that goes into our history, and I think we have to overcome that, recognize that, and resolve trauma. I mean, the worst thing you can do is repress your emotions and the trauma, because what isn't said becomes a symptom. So I've realized that in my life. So I try my best not to do any of those things, and try to take the good habits on.
Of course. Fair play. So I might ask a similar question, but slightly different for the two lads working in TU Dublin. So with Scott and Gary, I'll ask you what made you kind of want to go into this area. I suppose you're both, Gary, you're working in the disability office then as well, and Scott, you're working in counselling. So what made you kind of want to work in the area, and did you know that you would have to kind of work with people who have like good or bad mental health?
Do you want to go first, Gary, or?
Anyway, you go first, Scott.
Yeah, go.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'll go first. No, just to extend also just what John was saying, just well done, Fionn, to the Students Union for organising this, and it's really beneficial to have a focus and a lens on a particular group for those who identify as men, or people who would be male. In terms of my own journey, as you say, obviously for me becoming a therapist, it was kind of expected I'd be working good unwell mental health in their own lives. So this would be a terrain that I would be quite familiar with. But I suppose my own background is, for the audience here, I too was a third level student. I would have been considered, quite lucky. It was about 10 years ago when I was a student in university, and I would have been very involved in terms of student mental health. So this is always kind of a passion for me to get involved. And I suppose on that journey, when looking about getting involved in student mental health, I had experience with a friend who took their own life. I was a male friend of mine, Kevin. He passed away in December of 2006. He was actually a friend of mine in college on student campus when we were there. So that was definitely the first eye opener about the vulnerability of mental health, not only for everyone, but for this particular person who was a male friend of mine, and never showed it. And to this day, some of my buddies that who know each other, we would even reflect 10 years, 12 years later saying there's no science. There was no kind of stuff later appeared or emerged that we end up finding out, but most certainly over those 3-4 months getting to know that individual, we had no science results, the drinking, the banter, the crack, talking about you know, successes or whatever in terms of different aspects of life. And then from there, I got involved in kind of mental health campaigns, which kind of brought me into my line of work within therapy. And obviously, I'm delighted to be working in TU Dublin, supporting the students here. So that's just a little bit of personal about me, and then my own interests. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Are you want to continue on?
Okay, thank you. So again, similar to everyone else, obviously I have a physical disability myself. So growing up was a bit difficult for me because people looked at me because I had a disability and thought, okay, kind of, oh, poor him, what's he going to be able to do in the future? Or he's not going to be able to do much, or he'll go to a day center. It was that type of scenario back 20 or 30 years ago. And it was difficult. It was difficult, my own mental health. When I look back on it now, I didn't really, probably at the time, I didn't realize so much. But it was also difficult because obviously friends of mine, they were away playing football or doing things like that. So I was excluded, not deliberately from that, but I was excluded because just it wasn't suitable to go with them. So my education journey was, first of all, I did a degree, that was a degree in social science. So on that, we did touch on some mental health issues, and we also looked at mental health, the student union there as well. And then later on, I did a master's in UCD, and that master's was in equality studies. So again, that type of travelers, feminist theory, again, was mental health spoken about as well. So I did get the job as a display officer. Did I always think that would be the job for me? Probably not particularly, but obviously with having a disability, it worked out quite well. I have, over the years, I've had a number of students with mental health and also ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. So those students sometimes are very isolated. They feel there's no one to turn to now. Again, we have a counsellor as well on our campus, so I advise them, but quite often some students, I think male students, come in just to speak to me sometimes because they know deep down, I think they look at me, think, okay, he's a man also, he's with two different issues. So it gives it now, obviously, I'm not experienced today, but obviously I give the students advice where to go to, and I do listen to them and talk to them as well. Now we've quite a number of students with mental health issues, so registered. So it is good for me to feel that I'm enabling them to move on, to have someone to talk to, someone to talk to, and it does provide good support, I believe, them as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So we're all really here, I suppose, for the same reason as well, which is really, really nice to see. So I'm going to pose a few questions to the group, and you can answer whatever, like if you don't feel comfortable answering, fair enough, you know, or you can just continue on until like you find a question you're more comfortable with. But anyway, I'll start off with does anyone here feel that there's a stigma towards men struggling with mental health? And if so, do they want to maybe speak a little bit on that, if they on that statement?
Yeah. Okay.
Go on, John.
I'll speak on it. There absolutely is. This kind of term that's going around and called toxic masculinity. And what I'd say about that is I would have 5 or 6 years ago even said, yeah, there of course there's a thing called toxic masculinity. But unfortunately today, that has become that masculinity within itself is toxic. And I think that has been detrimental. And we see that nowadays, in the last 5 or 6 years, with younger men I think it's, you know, having to reject any sort of sense of masculinity. I think there's good and bad traits within masculinity. I think there's toxic masculinity, of course. And to me, how I used to define that was, you know, overextended machism that from stopped you from speaking about your own mental health, your own trauma, trying to live up to this idea of being tough and, you know, or quiet and that kind of silent type, you know. But I think that it's changed nowadays. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy that is around the whole thing, because I know even within my own community, it's we 11% of the travelers died by suicide, which makes it the highest suicide per capita in the world from any group. And I think in Ireland we're kind of like we're got to the place where we like talking about mental health, but I still think that there's a lot of stigma there, and I still think that men feel under pressure to be silent. So, and it's still, unfortunately, it's not getting worse. It's not getting better. Like so, this thing is
Definitely.
getting worse, and particularly with younger people, it's getting worse. I mean, I'm looking at suicides every week from the travel community and they're 13 and 14 years of age, and we see anxiety levels are through the roof. And I think social media has a huge part to play to that. So I think there needs to be an intervention of some sort from a government level, and we need to look at this in a very serious way. If you look at the money and investment they put into to like car accidents and advertisements for that and road kills and all this stuff. I mean, we don't have any of that for mental health. We don't have any of that for suicide, which is crazy considering a lot more people died that than in the car accident in Ireland, and a lot more of the real figures would be even higher because still people are ashamed, and if they can deny a suicide, they will and put it under any circumstances. Like my father killed himself, but yet his mother and father made sure and tried their best to get it down, put down as a drowning, which is how he died, but that's how he killed himself. So there's that shame that's there, and it's still there, I think, you know.
Yeah, I tip in that. I 100% agree with that as well. And you know, even coming from the GAA side, you know, we had like an intervention or whatever with the Westmeath panel a few years ago, and you know, where there's about 30 lads sitting in a circle, and there's a woman there asking us, you know, to literally say whatever comes to our or whatever we wanted to talk about. And there's 30 lads sitting there, and everyone looked at each other and didn't want to speak, you know. And it took maybe it took the woman to start talking about her personal life for someone else to start talking, you know. And you're right, John, like, you know, people kind of have that, like lads in the GA have that persona where they have to be hard, they can't, you know, let their emotions out. And, you know, when lads started letting their emotions out, you know, people start looking at them differently and, you know, seeing them more as a hard kind of figure because they were able to let that out as well. So, you know, 100% agree with you.
I was intrigued in terms of what was being offered. I suppose to offer it maybe to widen the conversation a little bit, just from my own perspective, from my own knowledge, is that over the last 10 years, the rate of suicide in Ireland has dropped by roughly about 20 to 25%. So there has been a decrease, and we've actually done that 50% quicker than Scotland and New Zealand and how they've done it over a 20-year period. So there is something just to acknowledge about that. And I've heard about the discussion about how much money is given to road safety in comparison to suicide prevention. And so how that comes about is that the road safety, I think, roughly gets about 50 to 60 million. And the National Office of Suicide Prevention, I think it's been increased, but I think it's around 15 to 20 million. But that doesn't include mental health services in primary care, secondary and tertiary levels. So the overall mental health budget is actually quite large in terms of, you know, the psychiatrists, the therapists, and the wider public health that's there. However, even taking in that wider amount, it's still below the EU average, which is where 12% of all health budgets, a minimum, it's encouraged that should be spent on mental health. We're about around 8 or 7%. So we're still underspending on mental health, even if we include the hundreds of millions that goes into other kind of mental health services. Looking at the stigma, it's absolutely there. The research done by Sea Change, and they're the organisers who lead out on the Green Ribbon campaign, shows that for young male, those who be in college and those with middle age and elderly, stigma, silence around mental health is huge, and it's very still prevalent. We're still surviving, or maybe not surviving is the right word. We're still dealing with the generational knock-on impact. What I say about generational knock-on impact is my father is in his late 70s. So he would have grown up in the 1950s and 60s when he was in my age. And then, and even going back to my grandmother's time, and this is only 2 layers above me, we had the most number of people placed in mental health hospitals in the country. Most number of people placed in mental health hospitals per capita population in the world. And this wasn't that we imagine them to be now. These were asylums where people were placed in. And the silencing within the community and within the don't let the neighbors find out about you, there are aspects and stories of how men were sentenced to these asylums so that the other brother could inherit the family land. And these kind of aspects about being a bachelor or being a single man and then being sent away were actually prevalent back nearly 100, 150 years ago. And when you look at generational, give or take 50 years, 40 years, that we're still not that far from it. And that has a huge knock-on impact. And when we look at stigma, think about those of us who may have had a male figure in our lives, or someone who would identify as a male figure in our lives, and consider how many times they've expressed emotion. I know for me growing up, the only time I ever saw my father cry was when my mother passed away. And that was once. And I'd be 33 now. So that in itself has a knock-on impact in terms of how we express emotion and how we also talk about it. Because think about the conversations you may see with the men on Love Island or on Big Brother or these TV shows, and those men who may look very physical or very masculine and they're expressing emotion, how do others, when we watch those programs or in social media, speak about that? And particular words might be associated when someone expresses emotion, especially for a man. And I think those have a silencing impact. It's the same way how people might talk about people who have mental health experiences and how people through the form of social media and other mediums speak about them. And I think that does have a knock-on impact about. So a lot has been done in terms of the systems and the services, and there's more to do, absolutely. But in terms of the stigma, it's still unfortunately present. And just to sum up, not to go on for too much, effectively what I would see with mental health, most certainly with men, is that we've gotten to a stage where we talk about it, but we talk about it. Like, I'm worried about my buddy, I think he has a drinking problem, or I'm worried that he has an issue, but we don't relate as a first person. We talk about it in third person. That would be kind of my kind of sense or experience from it. So just to offer that to the wider group.
I think you made some very good points there, Scott, as well. About the budgeting as well. Like, I remember I read recently, I actually think I sent it to you guys in a quote as well. It was a quote from the National Office of Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Strategy. They said men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. It's the highest rate is amongst these men who are between the ages of 45 and 54. And the aim of the report was to explore factors underpinning the highest suicides rate of middle-aged men and those that are marginalized. It said men between the ages of 40 and 59 have at least one of the following characteristics to put them in, characteristics. They put them at a greater risk of suicide. And the top ones are if basically the men who are gay, transgender, members of the traveling community, victims of domestic abuse, members of ethnic minority groups, farmers, unemployed, rurally isolated or separated or divorced fathers. So what do you guys think about that quote? That's from the HSC, National Office.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, life is hard enough, never mind when you come from a minority and having to take whatever extra stigma or discrimination that comes along with that. I do be surprised sometimes when people who don't know much about travelers start to add up everything and are shocked from when I reveal certain things to them, like the fact that I'm 30 years of age. And let's talk about what's going on right now in America with Black Lives Matter fighting for the rights and that kind of stuff, which I fully support. I made a documentary about African Americans in America, and I went on about the Native Americans. It was actually a mind-blowing experience for me. And what I learned was the results of racism are the exact same everywhere. There might be different histories, different whatever, but the results are always the same, and that's like high incarceration and low unemployment, like that. And that's the thing with Travers. Like, I mean, I was segregated when I went to school. We were segregated, put in an all travel class with Travers of all different ages and given colouring books. And they wouldn't even allow us to read, which is funny because I loved reading. And this was after doing doing the communion. It was kind of policy that Travers were sent, but once they went into third class, they were just put in an all travel class. So I loved reading, and I asked him for a book, and he said, "What, you can read?" So that's the sort of stuff I faced in the school. And getting hit by teachers in an era that you don't get hit by teachers, being called knacker and pie, and you start to become ashamed, and you start to hate yourself. And I see that it's so prevalent with Travers. That's why, Travers drink more and do all this more and go to prison more and all this. It's funny though, because when you use this sort of when a liberal lefty Irish person uses certain examples of minorities across the world, that's okay. But even a liberal lefty in Ireland won't use that same logical lens towards Travers. It's funny because such is the discrimination, and we've been sort of dehumanized greatly. So that quote does not surprise me. Any community, any people that are getting marginalized or hated are going to just have one extra thing hanging over their head, along with everything else, because life is not easy. But it can be beautiful at times. But there's a lot of hurdles for some people.
Again, students with disability sometimes are looked at as being odd or different, or again, as I've said before, not fit neatly into a box. So people think, oh, they're different, and then that results in that student being more isolated. I've had a number of students who've been with me and through the education process, and thankfully everyone graduated, which was great to see. But quite often they told me that they felt stigmatized, a bit like what John's saying, but in a different way, through their disability, the fact that they were afraid to maybe say something, and some of them did have substance abuse as well, just because of the fact that isolation of being on their own has meant the fact that they had no one really to speak to. So it is still difficult for a number of students with disabilities, but again, as I said, they don't fit into the box, and people see them as odd and different. So there's something odd about that, and which is very unfair as well.
Anyone else have any other? What did you have anything about the quote?
No, it's true. Like it's the same with black Irish kids or adults. You're kind of put into a, like growing up anyway, growing up in an area, as I said earlier, like, you're in an area where you're surrounded by white people and you're surrounded by white culture. And the only way you can really fit in is when you start putting yourself forward to their culture, instead of people realizing that, maybe they can learn a little bit more about you as a person or whatnot. But like me coming here, I knew I was in an area where it was full of old Irish people who, had their ways. And it kind of took for me to start playing GAA or to start doing what they want to do to be fitted in a little bit easier. So I agree with what everyone's saying as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree anyway myself with the statistics that were given. There was a study done, I think it was, I want to say in like 2012 or 2013, 14, kind of that time, about young people who were transgender as well. And it was, they did a survey on, I think it was 300 people. And it was like 40% of those people had tried to commit suicide more than 4 times. And I think 40% of 300, that's 150 people. Like, I definitely know 150 people, and it's quite a big number as well. So, and there definitely is a stigma, like I was saying earlier, coming from kind of living my life one way completely to having, you know, things being stigmatized. Like John spoke earlier about toxic masculinity. 100%, it's a real thing, because I do it to myself every day, every minute. Like, I mean, even going down to something so simple. I don't know if any of the lads here would agree, but like, say if you want like a drink, if the drink is pink or like light color, I know for myself, I freak out. I'm like, I can't get the pink drink because I don't want anyone to see me as a girl. I know it's something so simple, but it's true. Like, if it goes down to like, I know, like if somebody bought me, say, pink gin, sometimes I'd be like, oh, before I drink the pink gin, why can't I get the regular gin? And then sometimes I go, sure, feck it, we'll get the pink gin anyway. But like, it does take me a couple of seconds to realize what I'm doing. But yeah, it's all down to, I think anyway, like you were saying, toxic masculinity, John, as well as stigma. Maybe just going on from that, does anyone here feel like they might be criticized for opening up about their mental health, or for the fact of like standing up for someone with mental health? Because I know for one, I used to not feel like that, and I don't feel like that anymore. Like, I used to kind of worry, if I stick up for like your man down the road there because he's feeling blue, you know, I'd get judged. But now, obviously, again, going from one to the other, now I don't care. I'll stick up for any lad. If anyone wants to talk to me, I'm like, go ahead, speak your truth. So how do people feel about that?
Yeah, well, I think myself personally, I'd be quicker to speak up for somebody, stick up for them, listen to somebody, than I would even myself. You know, I suppose I don't always practice what I preach. But in saying that, I think it's about knowing the right people. Like, there's certain people I definitely would approach. And then there's certain people I wouldn't. And then there's another reason for not approaching. Like, for instance, I wouldn't speak to my mother about this, but just because I don't want to worry her. Do you know what I mean? So I'd absolutely trust her, but I don't want to worry her. I don't want to put extra stress or anxiety on her, because then I know she'll be worrying all the time. So that's another reason, you know. I think it's about targeting the right person, and then realizing that those people love you and they want you to live forever. You know what I mean? So once you kind of get over, you kind of have to get over yourself a little bit too, you know. Because when you do it, it feels great, because it's you know, you're just offloading something off the chest. You can breathe now. You know what I mean? Because I think when you hold the shit in, it's like this dark little secret. And I'm sure you know about this film, like, you know what I mean? Because you probably were having to keep in your secret for a long time and afraid about revealing it to people and all, you know? And I think depression is kind of like that in a way. Obviously not as extreme as that, but once you kind of share the secret, it's like it has less of a power over you, you know?
Yeah, I do agree. I agree. And once it's kind of let out,
same here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, same here. Like, yeah, same here. I'd be the same as John. Like, you know, I'd find it a lot harder for me to come forward and talk about my feelings to someone else. But, you know, I don't know whether I have a phase of someone that, because a lot of people come and speak to me about different stuff, and I'll be able to try give advice and help them out. But if the tables turn, I find it so much harder to open up and just to be, you know, straight up to someone else as well. You know, it takes nearly for them to nearly force it out of me for me to talk about it. You know, I don't know what that is, but it's just kind of the way I am. I'd rather listen.
I think we're all a bit like that. We need to practice.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Interesting enough, just kind of offer my experience of being a male therapist has always been, you know, there's been a lot of people I've worked with who they don't care, you know, the gender or the identity of the therapist. But then there are some who do, and there's something interesting when there is a male individual or someone who identifies as a male who requests, you know, obviously wanting to work, or they didn't expect to be working with a male therapist, and it's a really interesting experience. You know, how often do we do that ourselves? You know, in terms of having the discussions. I think, you know, one of the things, John, you were kind of mentioning there was about you know, the people you specifically would go to, and I think we can all mention other men in our lives that we could say we'll go to the pub and have a drink, and then, you know, you have your chat. Some other situations where that can be the response. But you know, I'm even thinking, like, I'm lucky to have my own male friends, you know, in terms of having those conversations. But it's an interesting perspective when a male and a male are having those conversations. in comparison maybe to a male having a conversation with another female or someone who identifies as a female. I think there's sometimes a difference, because I know for women for women find there's a difference when they're talking to other women, in terms of their own needs or mental health piece might emerge. So I just to kind of, I don't know, what do you have experiences of that, or to the wider group?
Women definitely.
Probably I would say, you know, probably I might be fortunate. I have a couple of very close male friends, so I could talk to them, you know, tell them maybe some very personal issues to me. They would know about me. I would know about them. You will. Again, probably, I think of it this as well. We usually go out for a drink together and then talk over these issues. So maybe the drink is a hidden thing just to relax, have a better conversation. That bit I'm not sure. But I wanted some good friends that I feel I personally can speak to, and I think they can, you know, I know quite personal things about them as well. So it works out quite well in that respect.
We were talking about there maybe women speaking a little bit better towards men and stuff as well. Well, I figured out, and I remember, you know, again, experience that with taking testosterone, I used to cry. I know this sounds quite sad, but I used to cry myself to sleep every night out of relief, and it was so good. I haven't cried in months now since I'm on hormones a year and a half now. I haven't cried in months, and I think it is to do with more like a hormonal kind of thing as well. But also stigma doesn't help on top of that as well. So I think, like, I mean, when I used to go into the girls' bathroom, you'd end up, you know, solving like 20 questions in there. And now when you go into the lads, you literally, nobody looks at anybody. Like, you know, it is kind of like, even I know it's only we're talking about the bathrooms, but it is such like a stigma and a way of thinking. Going to the bathrooms, you do.
Sorry about that.
You're grand. But like, you get in, you get out. Whereas I know that has a lot to say, where the girls used to say, oh, we'll go to the bathroom together, come back 20 minutes later. Because, you know, they're probably solving out someone has something going on. They're talking about it. It's not just, they're not just going to go to the toilet, lads. I tell you that now, because you could be solving, you know, millions of stuff in there. But was anyone nervous about this today? Because I know as we're talking now, I'm a bit chiller now. Like, but at the start, I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Was anyone nervous to talk?
No, I don't think I was nervous. I think I'd find it more nervous if I was completely being open, like if I was talking completely about my whole feelings and all that. But as he said back then, like, I think it's like, for me anyway, when I'm with the lads or whatever, you know, we'll find it hard to open up to each other. But then when we get a few drinks in us or whatever, we're out on a night out and we come back and we have a few drinks in us, we're just sitting there, you know, we start opening up and start talking about things we wouldn't normally talk about, you know, on a regular basis, or even if we're sitting there sober, we wouldn't talk about it. Like, you know, I don't know whether it's a lads thing or what it is, but that happens a lot.
Well, I know we were talking, sorry, we've mentioned a few times as well. I think Gary mentioned it as well, about substances and stuff and substance abuse. Just off of that topic, not saying you're going substance abuse. I just mean a lot.
Oh no.
I mean, a lot of people do turn to alcohol and drugs and stuff as well. So, do you think a lot of people would do that to mask their mental health, or what do you think? Because I think personally, from a few of the lads seeing, I think alcohol would be the more social accepted one, that the lads all going for a few pints and then it turns into a few pints of getting lashed, and then it turns into after the game, and then it turns into like every day, you know, like that's what I've noticed anyway. Does anyone else have any feelings on that?
Yeah, there is a correlation, and the research would show that people who engage in high levels of drinking or high dependency with alcohol, as well as weed, substances, you know, it can be a mask or a distraction or an avoidance regarding maybe what's going on for them or what else is happening in their lives. So now this isn't, I'm always very mindful about, like, there can be a healthy, if I can use that word, but there can be a social relationship with alcohol and maybe with weed, you know, but most certainly when it gets to a point where you're missing classes, you're missing work, it's impacting on relationships, you feel you can't leave until the bar is closing. Those are the knock-on impacts that those substances can have. And it can be shown. Like, think about how we generally deal with stress, or bad days. Generally, for men, if we have a really bad day in the office or a really bad day in college, we'll say, "Oh, I need a pint. I need to get a drink into me." Even how we celebrate victories, good moments, Ireland getting to the World Cup. Come on, lads, let's go down to the bar and have a drink. There's that kind of attachment with it. Now, there's a greatness about it, obviously culturally, socially, and healthily. As long as passing out or blacking out or doing going excessive, but there is a relationship about men and with external substances, and what do they cover and mask.
And also probably is unfortunately in the university sector, so they're not all, of course, but there's a lot of alcohol involvement and things organized and bars are going out. So it sometimes I feel it encourages abuse of alcohol as well as some the parties. Where are the parties? All the Christmas parties, all the nights out, they're all somewhere that sells alcohol, which is unfortunate as well. But again, that's the way life is now, and it's a social thing. So it's socially acceptable to be taking alcohol. But probably as Scott, who was better than I would know, with dealing with this, obviously alcohol deep down is a depressant. So it doesn't really have, obviously if you take it excessively, it is depressant, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I know ourselves with the union, we're trying to incorporate more non-alcoholic events as well on campus. But then obviously we're all here now because of COVID came in. So I think this is probably, I think anyway, we can lead on to a question about COVID is probably one of the best things for me anyway. I know it can be touchy because obviously I think the next pandemic is probably a mental health one, and I'll stand by that. I think it's probably not the best for some people. Maybe some people are stressed to talk about something, especially lads, sports, and like yourself would do, and like you were saying, acting for yourself, John. Maybe people were going to acting classes, maybe people were going to play GA, like that was their outlet, and now that's all stopped, especially in the hard lockdown. For me, it gave myself some time to self-discover what I want in life, how I think, whatever. But I know it is quite difficult for a lot of lads, people, everyone actually, since COVID. How do people think about COVID? Do you think it's probably it's one of those kind of good and bad kind of things, I find. But I do think out of COVID, we're going to have a lot of issues regarding mental health in Ireland.
Yeah, I think there has been anyway. I know that the first 3 months of COVID, I fucking loved it. And it was like 3 months. Fucking, this is great. So I get the COVID payment. I can just train, and I actually got down to the lowest weight I was in probably fucking 10 years or more actually. And then I dislocated my shoulder. That really pissed me fucking off. So then that started to kick in. The frustration started to kick in, and I think it's. I think I'm a little bit worried about it. I'm worried about certain people around me as well, because I know a lot of people. Like my grandmother's taking it so bad. It's like, I mean, she's really, really gotten bad with depression. Now, she lost her husband a year and a half ago, which is the underlying factor. But this the isolation has really affected her. So I'm worried about elderly people, I worry about elderly people in general a lot, because I have another grandfather who lives on his own, and I've become so aware of that. In my community, we kind of we have a real gra for older people, and we kind of worship older people in a way because we understand they've life experience and they've went through everything. And in my community, there's a lot of Shanachis, and you get a lot of knowledge passed down for the elderly. So I do worry a lot for the elderly, I have to say, in this next lockdown, because isolation is a horrible thing. Even my grandfather, like he's living on his own, he's such a mentally strong person. You have no idea. He's went through incredible trauma in his life, from industrial schools. He did prison, and he lost 5 children. He lost his wife, and he still hasn't been. He still hasn't broke. You know what I mean? But when I meant to meet him after that 3-month lockdown, he was, you know, a different man. He was so kind of manic and kind of, oh, he couldn't believe to see me and all, you know. And I really worry about him on his own. So that's where the focus is for me, is the elderly.
Yeah, definitely. Like for me as well, the first lockdown I thought was actually great for me too, because you know it was so full on with county football, club football, college football. It was mental. Like, so, you know, first lockdown kind of shut down everything, and you know, you could just kind of focus on yourself and, you know, get your body right and train when you want to train or whatever, do whatever you want to do. But you know, like the lockdown now, you know, like we're still playing away, but then, you know, the gyms. I used to work in the gym. You know, that's closed now, and people have nothing to do in the evenings. Come 5 o'clock, it's dark, and everyone's at home. You know, it's miserable. Like it's not fun. And you know, the last lockdown, obviously, you know, it was summer. You could go out and do your 5Ks or enjoy it or whatever. It was summertime. It was great. But you know, now, you know, as John said as well, you know, for the elderly people, you know, when it hits 5 o'clock, what can they do? You know, just sit around the fire all day and think about stuff, you know. And it's definitely going to hit people in the head a different way. And, you know, it's not going to be a fun couple of weeks.
I'm actually really intrigued when yourself guys were saying that you enjoyed your lockdown, the first one. I too enjoyed this as well. It was a great kind of taking a pause almost. I don't know if Gary kind of felt that as well. On a personal level, it was a really good opportunity to take a pause. But most certainly, what's very much coming out is that lockdown, or the situation that we're kind of living in, one of the helpful things that we can take from it, one is that this is going to be temporary, you know, in terms of where we are. So the restrictions, hopefully at whatever point that will be, they will reduce and more will happen that we can do. I think in terms of the audience who are listening here today, there's a really good opportunity to realign your priorities and your purpose. And Fionn, you kind of spoke about this by taking a pause and reevaluating things a little bit. And I think for many students who might be listening here today, this is a chance to kind of look at rebuilding or re-engaging with the college and with the course, and having that purpose, and looking at what time you need to give to the course, and kind of committing to the online lectures and utilizing resources in assessments. But in addition to that, there's also a good opportunity to build connections, you know, keep engaging with the existing people you have in your life, whether through technology or social distance walking can still occur, you know, because there is an aspect where there's very much this kind of like, we can't see, where there is aspects within the outdoor space, you know, with social distance being put in, that you can go for public walk, and that may allow you to engage with people, or be it through technology. So I think it's really important to keep those aspects as an optimist, because constantly saying, what are we missing out on, or isn't this awful? If we keep hammering home that message, I don't know how helpful that's going to be for people when dealing with isolation. And I think, John, it's an absolute true point about the elderly people, and for rural men, you know, around Ireland, men who may not have families or partners at the moment. And Ireland at the best is such a community place in terms of across the country. And I can only imagine how tough this aspect of not being able to see grandchildren, or meet other men or other people, or men's sheds, you know, that's a great community resource for many men to engage in. And this is also another aspect about men who are very practical, you know, with their hands, like artists, very you know, very talented in terms of the work that they do in carpentry and other.
Yeah, skilled workers.
Yeah, skilled workers, you know, like, so there's a real aspect about what those roles and those kind of things that men can do in group. Because I know the men's sheds do a lot of those kind of activities and gardening and that kind of stuff. It's really rewarding in groups. So it's really unfortunate that that's not there. But again, this is temporary. This is going to move to a different phase where we can. And I think, you know, there's an aspect of utilizing what we currently have, and then making plans, and maybe re-acknowledging our gratefulness for the things we did have, now after them being taken away. There is a piece about that as well. So that's just off of that.
Yeah, and probably just in my working as well, on personal level, the first lockdown, it did give me an opportunity to focus, and I had actually never worked from home before. So obviously the commute back and forward to Tara, I live the south side of Dublin. So it's at least 1 to 1.5 hours per day, three hours per day per week. So that mounted up. So literally it was a relief to think and relax and seemed to have more time. Obviously I was sticking on a computer at 10 a.m. in the morning. So I had to travel to work. So it was beneficial at that time. Probably as time has went on, second after you do miss the connection with your colleagues at work, etc. And from a student perspective, again, I know students who look at this. Initially, the first lockdown, it was major panic. Students were panicking, were contacting my office I was contacting them to reassure them that everything would be okay with exams, etc. There's exams in May. So it did go. It actually went reasonably well. And everyone adapted, obviously put in special consideration for students with disabilities. But it's interesting, at this stage, some students have almost said to me and to some of my colleagues across the disability sector that they think, okay, we mightn't bother going in to university anymore. They almost think this is a better way. Obviously, I wouldn't advocate that out of it. It's important for students to go into college, meet others, speak with friends, etc. But it's interesting that some are not so annoyed by it at all. They think, okay, this is a good way to save us having to travel or pay expensive school premises, but somewhere to stay, etc. So there's a couple of issues there as well.
Yeah, I think what you were saying there about the traveling, I mean, I used to take me like from where I live. I don't live that far. I live in Dublin still, but it used to take me over an hour to get into work. So I don't know about anyone else, but I'm quite enjoying the Lion and the showers on my lunch break. I mean, like, they're amazing. So like, it's the little things I think the kind of I enjoy from working from home now. But yeah, we've just kind of come near the end now. So and I see we have a few questions. I hope you guys don't mind us kind of turn to questions. And if anybody wants to ask us questions, they're more than welcome. I'll just go through the questions now as well. Yeah, so someone says, it's great to hear open and honest discussion from a panel of members. It was enlightening to hear the impact being from a minority had on everyone's mental health. I'd be interested to hear if the supports within their relative communities has any more of an impact on them than those of the people from outside of their communities. As in, does it mean more coming from someone who has a similar background to you or not? Open that up to the floor.
So there's an aspect about the research when looking at stigma reduction. Actually, what has a bigger impact on social behavior, so social norms when it comes to speaking up more openly about mental health, is actually real people, real stories. It's shown through the UK Time to Change campaign and Scotland's See Me campaign and the See Change campaign. Real people with real stories have just as much impact as celebrities do in terms of their disclosures and that, which is a really interesting kind of piece. And I wonder, is there a piece about relatability? I know from an initiative I ran a number of years ago, that's back in 2014, we did a thing with rural men and with the IFA, the Irish Farmers Association. We actually had farmers speaking about their mental health difficulties to the farming group. And it really had way more of a direct and more powerful impact than me as a trained professional having a talk about it. So, you know.
Yeah, well, what I'd say about that is I know that I've done a lot of mental health talks myself around Ireland with traveller groups. And I think that's one of the things that has been pointed out to me, especially by people who work within the groups, is that it has had more of an impact than, say, an academic coming or somebody coming, because there is so much stigma within travellers and traveller men, you know. So hearing me, a big traveller man, masculine, talking about that, because I've literally had rooms full of people. I know our culture so well. I know what I have to do. I know how to warm them up. But I've had rooms full of men, and literally having everybody in the room talking about their whole mental health history, talking about family members who have committed suicide, men crying and opening up. So I know within my specific community, there's more of an impact generally when I would go in than someone who wouldn't be as familiar, let's say. And I know that with me, it's like it's mad because my two best friends are settled, and I'd open up to them before I would open up to any of my traveler friends. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's still embedded in my head. I think it's just more convenient to go to my two settled friends. I think they're less likely to tell you to fuck off. You know what I mean? Unfortunately. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Yeah, I'll go. I suppose my one wouldn't really be more on mental health. It'd be more on kind of my background, my story, and more on, you know, how a young kid from, you know, from a shanty town has come over to country like Ireland. And, you know, it's weird because I never really realized there's so many that are in the same boat as me. I'm just, you know, fortunate enough to be able to tell it.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously other people who have the same, you know, have the same story as me don't have the opportunity to tell it, but they also have obviously a different mentality about it as well. And, you know, it affects them differently than it affects me. And, you know, for me, sharing my story and, you know, getting it out there, you know, I get other people coming back to me and saying how, you know, it's helped them, you know, share theirs and help them go through different things as well. And, you know, I find that, you know, very key for me as well. And, you know, help me and helping them, which is, you know, it's great.
Again, probably for myself, it's good, obviously, over my years of working this job for TV Dublin, I've done presentations, I've spoken about personal issues, about myself, how I come to get degree masters and then get the job within the space factor in TV Dublin. So it's good. I have many students who come to me and say, "Oh, how do you manage that?" And maybe they've been a little bit down to think, "Oh, I don't think I can do it." And I know it's there. If I could do, you certainly can do it. So it's encouraging them. I know people talk about TV stars, these people that see on the TV, but quite often they're not real people. So it's good for someone, if someone local, someone that they know has been through experience that they can speak to. I know this genuine. There's a real person that's encouraging them as well.
Well, I suppose for myself, it's the question was like, does it mean coming from someone who has a similar background to you? If I'm being honest, not for me. If anyone in the trans community turned around to me and started talking about their mental health, I'd be like, oh, I don't really care. Like, it's just because all I cared about, and it is a thing to do with gender dysphoria, is when gender dysphoria is when your brain basically is not aligned with the sex you're born with. So for me, it's my way of thinking is all I want to do is be like those lads. So if those lads, again, it goes back to toxic masculinity, and if I appear or act a certain way, then that'll make me seem more male, you know. So if straight this lad like started saying something to me and said to me, oh, and gave me some advice, I'm going to be honest, I probably would take it on. And I think that's just for my own fault of my own mental health. That's where that comes from. Like, if any of you lads told me something here compared to someone else in the trans community, I probably would unfortunately believe you over them, because again, it's just mental health. It's just how it works. But if somebody it says if you hear supports and would you around other communities, but yeah, no, just to reiterate what I was saying, like I would be more impacted probably from somebody who isn't in my community, but that's just my own personal thing. Other people might feel differently. It is just the way, you know, how my head works, unfortunately. Like, I mean, if I have to sit here and talk about mental health, I will. But I probably, again, what we were saying at the start of the conversation, probably wouldn't open up as much as what I should. But I think we were all talking about that earlier. And another question just came in there, sorry. It says, is it mentioned about men offloading after a few drinks on a night out, and that there is ideas of things like men's sheds or weekly football five-a-side, similar things like that. With COVID and restrictions and not having such social outlets, how do the panelists feel that men in particular can compensate, replace these outlets to lessen the impact on their mental health? That's a good question. Does anyone want to go ahead?
Did you say that question again, actually?
Yeah, no problem. So I think the main from the question is, how do the panelists feel that men in particular can replace outlets such as physical things like men's sheds or going on a few drinks? How can they replace the outlets to lessen the impact of their mental health? So for me, calling somebody.
I suppose for me, yeah. So it's just gonna say for me, you know, I have one of my best friends who, you know, I'm very poor communicating with people. I'm terrible at calling someone or, you know, like he gives out to me the whole time. So one of my best mates would call me every now and then and literally just have a 5 minute chat about nothing, you know, and it means a lot, even though we're talking about fuck all, you know, but it means a lot as well. And you know, sometimes when I pick up the phone and call him, and it's a surprise as well, it's something that he doesn't expect, and you know, it means a lot to him too. And I think that's key as well.
You just muted yourself there. You just muted yourself by mistake.
Sorry. No, another thing, like I suppose if you're sitting there and you're bored and you have nothing to do, it might actually surprise someone if you actually just pick up the phone and give them a buzz and literally just have a 5 minute chat about anything. You know, a lot of people appreciate that more than anything else than actually being face to face or going out for a drink or whatnot. You know, I really would recommend just calling someone or, you know, Zooming someone or Snapchatting someone, you know, literally communicating over the screen is so important as well.
Yeah.
I suppose again, probably I'd back that up as well because I've discovered even personally myself, I've called big men, but I haven't talked to them before 2 or 3 months. They know I've more time now. I must give him a call. I must give them a call. And it will start to chat and just, maybe just even for half an hour, they've called back. So maybe I had because of time and you're always rushing and trying to do things, it's slightly more time. So I've contacted friends. So again, I would advise anyone just to lift the phone, call someone, should be WhatsApp, whatever medium they want to use. Just give some of those people maybe you haven't spoken to, and just give them a call and have a chat.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Kind of the way I do it though, I kind of have a little strategy when talking to friends if I know they're a bit down. And what I would do is I'd invite them to go for a swim in the sea. The colder, the better. And you just find that when you go out into nature like that, you kind of get connected spiritually and you're willing to be a little bit more vulnerable. Plus, you're getting the benefit of, you know, loads of magnesium from the water. You're killing the inflammation in your body. And there's 89 other minerals that is in the water that we can't even retain in the human diet. So you kind of trick them both ways. And yeah, you have a chat in the sea. I think it's a great way. But a friend of mine kind of taught me that when I was really down 4 or 5 years ago. And he just brought me out to the sea and I kind of offloaded and let it go in the sea and came out and I felt amazing, you know.
Very good. A question came in there as well. One piece of, I think we're probably on the same kind of question here. Like it says, if you'd like to hear one piece of advice from everybody here and how to mind their mental health, increase positive mental health, or any tips at all. So I suppose, John, yours is get into the sea.
Yeah, the sea, and you need to go. You need to exercise, of course, because you need to release that serotonin in your own brain and your dopamine. Yeah, you feel great after exercising, and walks in nature. It's such a cliche, but you have to remember for 9.9% of our existence, we lived in nature. And only in the last couple of 100 years, even less, you know, are we kind of, you know, concrete is coming in and we're being surrounded by that and we're, you know, so it's unnatural for the human being. So I think going out with nature, connecting with that stuff, I'm big into that. That helps me a lot. That and swimming, yeah.
Yeah, just to come in here and just to completely reinforce what John has just said, exercise, routine, structure. It is the number one thing, and people will be sick of hearing this from us who work in the area or people who are living through what we're kind of experiencing at the moment. But it is so simple. Make sure you have your breakfast and your main meals. Get out and get some fresh air, and certainly just allocate some time to doing your assignments or doing some of your college work. And once you have that, there's a sense of feeling in control and you're going to feel productive and that's going to have a positive impact on your overall well-being. So I would really, encourage that.
So, yeah. Gary, do you want to go? And one piece of advice.
It's again probably a backup. Everyone's said so far. It is so important for people, just even go out for, even if it's a 15-minute walk, 30 minutes walk, just leave if you're studying, again, the students, if you're studying, just go out, go for a walk. You don't have to run 10 kilometers, just go for a walk, 15 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, and maybe do it even twice a day. Maybe study in the morning, as Scott has said, routine, maybe get up, have your breakfast, do a bit of study, go out for a walk 15 minutes. Just that simple, straightforward, and it's definitely good for your mental health. Because again, I have a friend who he goes running every night, and he has 3 kids, and his wife's in an apartment, quite a small apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. So he relaxes. He goes out there for a run. So when he goes out, he relaxes. I said it's the difference. It's unbelievable how good it is for him as well. So I advise students to do that if they can.
What do you do for yourself?
Yeah, for me, I suppose would be, exercising obviously is a big part of mine, but I exercise all the time anyway. So for me, kind of rewinding is more, as everyone kind of said it already, would be literally just go outside, go for a little quick walk. I'm fortunate where I live, it's very scenic. You can get to walk in forest or in the woods or whatever. So literally a nice walk is perfect, clears the head. You can just think about different things in your head, or you can even bring in your headphones, put in your headphones, listen to music, and go for a brief walk. And another thing as well, we already mentioned it, literally just pick up the phone and give someone a text or a buzz. If you're feeling lonely or you're on your own or you don't know what to do or talk to anyone, just pick up the phone to someone, give them a buzz. They'll appreciate it even more, and vice versa.
Yeah, I suppose I love real exercise as well, but I'm not one for exercising every day when it gets cold. So something I like to do is, like you were saying, just give someone a call, watch something on Netflix, a bit of self-love, and that'd be some advice I'd give to people. Or like pick up a new craft. I know we have crafting with Moya. Moya she used to be the welfare officer last year. Now she's the deputy president this year, and she's making the little like fortune teller things, and she like knits and stuff, and like. I'd love to see, like, I've never seen any lads knit. I'd love to see some lads knit. Like, I think that'd be gas. Like, I think it'd be great, to like, as an outlet, or like do some drawing, or like, my friend's an artist, he paints, like stuff like that. If you can't go out and have exercise, I think it'd be a great way to pick up some new skills. Like, I know I started learning Irish again. I haven't spoken Irish since I was about my oral when I was 18 in school. Like, so I started picking up Irish again and trying to get the Cooper Fucker. Like, that's kept me going during COVID. And like it's helped my mental health, even though I know a load of people with it. But sure, look, it's something that keeps me happy anyway. But yeah, lads, we've run out of questions now and we've come to the end. So I suppose I'm just going to stop